The audience at the View could feel the tension building long before the cameras started rolling. Tim Allen, the beloved actor and comedian known for his no-nonsense wit and conservative-leaning humor, was back on the show to promote his new comedy series. The producers were thrilled. It was sure to be a ratings booster, but behind the scenes, whispers had already begun that Joy Behar was not exactly thrilled about his return. Their past interactions had been prickly, and anyone who had watched their earlier exchanges knew the potential for sparks was high. Still, no one could have predicted just how heated things would get once the cameras started rolling. The show opened casually enough. Whoopi Goldberg, sitting at the center, welcomed the audience and introduced Tim with her usual charm. "We've got the very funny Tim Allen with us today," she said as the audience erupted in applause. Tim came out smiling, cracking a small joke about being brave enough to return to the View without protective gear. The audience laughed, but Joy's smirk said she wasn't amused. "Well, we promise not to bite," Joy quipped, though her tone made it sound more like a warning than a joke. For the first few minutes, things went smoothly. They discussed Tim's show, his return to stand-up, and his reflections on family and humor. But as soon as the conversation shifted toward politics and culture, something the View never shied away from, the atmosphere began to shift. Sunny Hostin brought up a question about comedy's changing landscape. "Do you ever feel limited now in what you can joke about?" she asked. Tim leaned forward, his expression thoughtful but his words sharp. "Comedy's supposed to push limits. These days, everyone's too sensitive. You can't tell a joke without a dozen people trying to cancel you online. It's exhausting." Joy cut in almost immediately. "Or maybe people are just tired of jokes that punch down," she said, her arms crossed. The audience let out a collective "ooh," sensing what was coming. Tim smiled tightly. "Punch down. Joy, it's comedy. If we start deciding who's allowed to laugh and who's not, we'll end up with nothing but TED Talks and awkward silences." Joy leaned forward, not backing down. "There's a difference between being funny and being offensive, Tim. Maybe people just don't think it's funny anymore to make jokes at someone's expense." Tim's voice hardened. "Then maybe people need to toughen up a bit. Life's offensive, Joy. You don't get to wrap the world in bubble wrap and call it progress." The crowd gasped, half cheering, half uneasy. Whoopi tried to step in, raising her hand slightly. Okay, let's keep it friendly," but Joy wasn't done. "You know, Tim, maybe if comedians stopped acting like victims every time someone disagreed with them, we could all move on." That was the spark. Tim's face changed, his smile faded, and his tone turned sharp. "Victims. I've worked my whole life to make people laugh, Joy. I've been booed off stages, cancelled, and called every name in the book, but I keep going. That's not playing the victim, that's called resilience." Joy fired back without missing a beat. "Or maybe it's stubbornness disguised as wisdom." The audience erupted, half laughing, half gasping again. Whoopi sighed deeply, muttering, "Here we go," under her breath. Tim leaned forward, his eyes locked on Joy. "You know what, Joy? You sit here every day talking about tolerance, but the moment someone doesn't agree with you, it's like you've declared war. Maybe that's the problem. Not the jokes, not the comedians, but people who can't handle a different opinion." Joy shot back, "Oh please, don't lecture me about handling opinions. I sit here with conservatives all the time. I just don't let bad ideas slide because someone calls it a joke." The studio audience was now divided, some clapping, some booing, some simply holding their breath. Tim's voice rose slightly, frustration breaking through his usual calm. "Bad ideas? You mean ideas that you don't agree with? That's what's wrong with this whole conversation. Everything's filtered through politics. You can't just laugh anymore. You have to check if it's politically correct first." Joy's tone grew sharper. "Maybe because some jokes hurt people, Tim. Maybe you should try being funny and thoughtful." Tim's expression hardened completely. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling sharply through his nose. "You know what, Joy? I've spent 40 years making people laugh without needing approval from you or anyone else sitting at this table. Maybe the world doesn't need another lecture about comedy from people who forgot how to take a joke." That line hit hard. The audience gasped. Whoopi gave a subtle, "Wrap it up," signal to the floor manager, but it was too late. Tim wasn't done. You talk about kindness and empathy, Tim continued, but where's that when someone you disagree with walks through the door? You've already decided who's right and wrong before the conversation even starts. That's not discussion, that's arrogance. Joy's eyes flashed. And maybe arrogance is thinking you can say whatever you want without consequences, she said sharply. You're not being silenced, Tim. You're just being challenged. That was the breaking point. Tim slammed his hand lightly on the table, not in anger, but in emphasis. You call it a challenge, I call it censorship wrapped in politeness. You can't have comedy without freedom. If you're afraid of being offended, turn the channel. The studio audience broke into loud applause, half cheering, half nervous laughter. Joy rolled her eyes, but Whoopi finally stepped in, her voice steady and firm. Okay, that's enough, you two. We're not turning this into a showdown. Everyone gets to speak, everyone gets to breathe, and no one needs to explode on daytime TV. Tim took a deep breath, realizing he had gone further than he intended. He gave a small, almost apologetic smile, but the tension lingered. Fair enough, Whoopi, he said quietly. But I'll say this, if people can't handle a difference of opinion, they shouldn't be in the audience for a comedy show. Joy muttered under her breath, or maybe the comedians should grow up a little. When the show cut to commercial, the audience buzzed with energy. Producers rushed in to diffuse the tension, but Tim just leaned back in his chair, shaking his head with a wry grin. Guess I'll make the highlight reel again, he joked. Joy gave him a sideways glance, half irritated, half amused. You think, she replied dryly. As they went back on air, both put on their professional smiles, but the air between them still sizzled. Viewers at home had just witnessed one of the View's most charged exchanges in recent memory. By the time the episode ended, social media was already ablaze with clips of the confrontation, some praising Tim for standing his ground, others defending Joy for calling him out. But one thing was certain. Tim Allen had lost it on The View, and daytime TV had just gotten another unforgettable moment of live, unfiltered truth.